Okay.
Military Science, or ROTC, the training of military officers. And the University of Missouri, if you go back to when I was a freshman, the University of Missouri required all males without prior military service to have 2 years of ROTC, and then the third and fourth years were optional. And that's where our A&Ms came from in the country, such as Oklahoma A&M, which now is Oklahoma State, Texas A&M, which still is Texas A&M. Those were as a result of the Land Grant College Act. And Texas A&M, my understanding is, has turned out more officers for the Army than has at West Point. Now, they talked about that the name of that was Land Grant. That was the Land Grant Act. Now, how did that part come about? Well, the federal government awarded every state in the nation 30,000 acres per congressman and senator. And then the states were allowed to sell that land and take the proceeds from the sale of that land and build a land grant institution. MU became a land grant in 1870. Now, MU was already a state university. How many of you graduated from University of Missouri? All right, when was it founded? We'll test here.
39.
1839. Hey, who said that? You get the gold star today. If I just had one, I'd hand it to you. It became a state in 1821, but it was already a state university. Now, Missouri is a little different than most states. There's very few states that where the state university and the land grant are the same institution. University of Nebraska is one, because University of Nebraska did not have a state university until the Land Grant Act. And then they established the University of Nebraska as a land grant to start with. Then this was a little bit controversial even for the state of Missouri. Probably can't imagine that. Not everybody liked the idea of having livestock and smelly steam engines on the campus of their state university. To me, as a graduate of the university and as a graduate of the Land Grant College, I've always been very, very proud of the fact that on the campus in Columbia, I could be in the College of Agriculture, walk a few yards, medical school was located, a few yards, the law school was located. It was one of those few institutions in the nation that was a combination and had all of those things on the same site. Think about the University of Kansas, where's the Med Center? It's not at Lawrence. The Med Center is in Kansas City, Kansas. But our state university, state land grant, it's all in the same place. Now, there was another land grant that was passed in the 1890s. And you're probably I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about that in the second part of your program today. That's the Black Land Grant. Now, the land was already passed out, but there was funding made available. Then in the 1990s, the third Land Grant Act, and that was the tribal colleges. And I think there were about 29 of those at the time. And I've had a chance to work with 4 of those as a consultant evaluator at one time or another. So that's the first big act as far as occupational education and national security. Then if we move on up, what was going on in around 1917? World War I. The United States then had entered World War I. The Smith-Hughes Act was passed. And at that time, the Smith-Hughes Act looked at areas that were in need for national defense. And again, it was food was part of it. Production of food, so high school agriculture was supported. It was also making certain that the food was taken care of, that it was nutritious, making some headway in those areas, so home economics was added, and trade and technical skills were added, because there again, the country needed food production, and they needed weapons, they needed manufacturing. If we remember the signs of seeing the old posters of Rosie the Riveter, things like that. And they needed to build a variety of war equipment. So the three areas of ag, trade and technical, and home economics. Someone gave me several years ago a book that was put out by the Army during that period of time. It was an ag or an auto mechanics book. And guess what vehicle they featured in that auto mechanics for all of their examples? A Jeep, military Jeep. So that was provided to high schools to teach. They also, during that period of time, started veterans farm training, which lasted for quite some time as well. Then if we move on up, we'll start talking about this. This kind of sets the stage, in a way, for, Chris said Lynn Tech. Everybody knows Lynn Tech. Not everybody knows State Tech. We're making a lot of headway in that area though, as Shawn's gonna tell you. But I have given this talk before, and there have been times when I have said, I'm gonna say it today, there are two men who deserve major credit for playing a role, either directly or indirectly in one case, in the starting of Lynn Tech. One of them, Nikita Khrushchev. The other one, Thurman Willett. What happened? October the 4th, 1957. Now I realize you were pretty young at that time, probably don't remember much about it. What was it? Sputnik. Sputnik went over. If you want to hear what that, if you don't remember hearing it on the news then, you can find out now. If you look it up, Google it, and you can hear the little beep, beep, beep of Sputnik. 185 pounds of steel that the Russians fired up into the air, and it circulated around. President Eisenhower, I can remember him coming on the news, and he was doing all he could to assure us that with the launching of Sputnik, our world was not going to come to an end. Yet there are a whole lot of people that believed, probably rightfully so, that our country had fallen behind the Soviets from the standpoint of math, science, foreign language, and the teaching of technology. And therefore, again, in national security and education, Congress passed the National Defense Education Act, or NDEA, and a lot of money was pumped in to math, science, technology, and there were some things that was even funded that was a little bit on the edge, that was a little different. Well, about that time, Thurman Willett was the superintendent of schools at Lynn. And the story that I heard was that during graduation, Thurman would watch the kids cross the stage, and they'd say, there's one that's going on to a four-year institution. There's one that ought to be doing something, but they're not going on to anything beyond tonight. And as he thought about that, he got the idea of trying to start something a little different. And he got an $8,000 grant to start teaching electronics to 12 students, 12 post-secondary students in the basement of the high school, where they even had live music at times because their classroom was under the band room. That was in 1961. Thus, Lynn Technical College was born. Those 12 students graduated in 1993. All 12 were offered a job with McDonnell Aircraft, because McDonnell was big time in the space. Most of the 12 took the jobs. Some of the 12 stayed through their entire career. Some got a baccalaureate degree in engineering from Washington University, courtesy of McDonnell Aircraft. There was one that even got a master's degree. And there were some, though, that decided St. Louis isn't for me. They either didn't go, or they came home and they worked in TV shops, or did something like that. But I have said many times, or had a chance to speak to that group one time, and to thank them for the reputation that the 12 of them built by going out and being very highly successful. And I think the fact that they did what they did, and then other students and other programs that were added on, such as auto mechanics, drafting, did a good job as well, made it much more possible for those that wanted to see the college grow and expand to do what it did. Then in 1993, Congress passed the Vocational Education Act that enabled the establishment of area vocational technical schools, such as Nichols Career Center, Columbia Career Center, Eldon. They did 58 of those across the state. They were designed primarily to serve secondary students, with the exception of the one at Lynn. And it was set up to serve primarily as an adult preparatory institution and to do post-secondary students. At that time also, state law allowed a K-12 district in Missouri to offer the 13th and 14th years. Thus, we had the junior college. Jeff City Junior College was one of those. Moberly Junior College was one of those. Trenton Junior College. A lot of those then, later on, there was a law passed that grandfathered in those that wanted to stick around, and then the rest become community colleges. Well, the official name was Lynn Technical College. Over the period of time, there were attempts made to make the college a state institution. And it was my understanding that they usually had a governor on their side, but they could never get the entire legislature on their side. Until 1995, Senator Mike Lieber from Texas County, and he also represented Osage County. His district came all the way up, took in Callaway County as well. And the board was interested in seeing the college transferred to the state, to the R2 board. When I was hired in '93, that was one of the goals that I was given, was to come up with a plan that would separate Lynn Tech from the K-12 system. Up until that time, K-12 would be, the board would meet on K-12 business one night a month with the superintendent, and meet another night of the month with the president of the college on tech business. And it just so happened that the right people who believed in this were in the right place at the right time. Senator Lieber had a lot of power. Senator Lieber was appropriations chair, and the appropriations chair can make some things happen that is hard for other people to have happen. Well, in 1995, in the last hour of the legislative session, on the last day, Senate Bill 101 passed. And we had Lynn State Technical College. That was the current name. Lynn Technical College was made by Lynn Technical College, and then Lynn State Technical College. That name, the legislature later passed legislation to name, change the name to the State Technical College of Missouri to better reflect the obvious mission that the college was serving. Well, I've left out a lot of the gory details as to how sausage is made. You know, they say there's two things you don't want to watch being made, that's sausage and that's legislation. And I did, as the president, become kind of the lightning rod for paying pittance to move to something that hadn't been done before. Then on my retirement, someone said, well, you know, you won't be able to find anybody to replace you with what you've done. I said, my goal, and I was asked to serve on the search committee, which is highly unusual, but my board president said, we want you on the search committee as well. I said, well, my goal would be to see someone take my job that will do wonders for this place and take it to the next level. That I can drive by 10 years from now and say, man, oh man, look at that place, look what he did. And that's who they got. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shawn to talk to you about why it's the #1 in the nation in a lot of categories, and maybe through third or fourth in some others. So, Dr. Strong, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning. Good morning. All right. Thank you. So Don's got an extremely long tenure, longest serving president ever at State Tech, 23 years. The tenure of college presidents doesn't tend to be very long. Actually, I think I'm one of the longest serving presidents at a college or university at this point. I think among the universities, I think I may be #2 behind Cliff Mark down at Missouri State. So we don't last very long, but to last 23 years is nothing short of incredible. So when I started 7 years ago, I came in thinking okay, this school has got some things backwards. They're not doing everything that is contemporary in higher education. In higher education, we talk about online education, we talk about stackable credentials, we talk about apprenticeships. People that offer associate's degrees want to offer bachelor's degrees. People that offer bachelor's degrees want to offer master's degrees, and people that offer masters want to offer professional doctorates, and those that want to offer professional doctors want to offer PhDs. So we do have a scope creep issue in higher education, and I came in as a new college president thinking, okay, this school is still pretty backwards. It's pretty traditional. We're going to change things, but it didn't take me very long to figure out you don't argue with the numbers. I mean, the numbers showed that we were doing things that nobody else was doing. So very quickly, I think I probably got the same mindset that Dr. Claycomb had for many years, and decided we're gonna do one thing, just like he probably thought, and Thurman Willett probably before that, and we're gonna do one thing and we're going to do it better than anyone. And that is offer primarily at the Associate Applied Science level technical degrees. So the good thing about coming just 7 years ago, I still have electronic records of every fall semester when I did startup. So I can actually walk through every year for the last 7 years in a little bit of detail. And it is interesting to see how quickly things evolve at State Tech. And if you look at the buildings we had when we took over and we moved to that campus in, what was it, 96, I want to say? Does that sounds like about right? So how quickly things happened then, and now how quickly things were happening today. So when I took over, Dr. Claycomb had started 2 projects. The welding building was in design, and the Health Science Center was in design. That was a strategic decision they made to move. The Nichols Career Center had a lot of our health science programs, and the decision was made to bring those back to the main campus, and one of the best probably decisions to ever be made. So in 2017, the next year, we had Governor Greitens, and do we have any Greitens fans in here? Governor Greitens didn't last very long, but in his short tenure, it became very clear that he thought we had a lot of bloat in higher education. And if you really dug down, I think that he thought if he pinched us hard enough that there would probably be an institution that would, or 2 that would close. And may or may not have been his goal, but it kind of felt like it. But we had an appropriation cut, and at that point we said, we've got to focus everybody on one thing, and that is growth. We weren't going to cut our way out of this. We were going to grow our way out of it. And so we went through some reputation planning. So if you hear the tagline, employer's choice, that actually came from our advisory council. We have about 400 people on our advisory council. And I remember very clearly the advisory council that was, okay, what's our shtick? What's our tagline? And after everybody said all these different things, it became very clear that we are the employer's choice. When an employer gets a pile of resumes, a State Tech resume goes to the top. So we started focusing on enrollment. It was in 2017, which continues today, when people ask, how are you guys growing, when nobody else, the only other school in the state that has grown any in the last 10 years, anybody know it? Anybody want to guess? Northwest Missouri State. They're the only 4-year union. None of the 2-year schools are growing. The only other school that's grown any at all has been Northwest Missouri State. Whereas we are up about, if you look at even the last 6 years, we're up about 75%. So people ask, well, what's the difference between you and everybody else? And I won't claim credit, but I will say we focus on enrollment. We focus on outcomes, and as a result, actually before I came to this meeting, every day or every Tuesday of every week of the year, we have an enrollment management meeting. And who's the person leading that enrollment management meeting? It's not my enrollment manager, it's me. Because ultimately I'm accountable for everything is around growth. If we're not growing, it's kind of like a church or anything else. If you're not growing, you're dying. So we definitely lead the charge on that. If you look at our marketing, we definitely increased our marketing staff, and hopefully you've all seen our commercials and think we do an okay job of that. And so in that second year, we were up 2%. We finished a welding center, and our enrollment was up 2% overall. We were excited about that because we were at least we could see our efforts were starting to pay off. So around rolls 2018, we had a $2 million capital appropriation for a utility technology building. I was very excited about that. I know you've seen a lot bigger appropriations than that in your tenure, but that was my first big appropriation. So we had about $3.5 million in construction maybe at that time. We had an initial gift for Safety Village that I'll talk about a little bit, but in the fall of 2018, we were up 10% in enrollment. That was a big deal. We thought, okay, all right, now can we sustain it? We opened the Health Science Center. We started a utility systems technician program. We started a 2-year nursing program. We were number 3 in Forbes. That is one that I'll always say. So Forbes ranked technical colleges for 1 year. And so we were number 3 that year. So my joke always is, if things fall apart and we're no longer national ranked, we'll forever be ranked number 3 in the nation by Forbes. So we'll use that as long as we have to. Fortunately, we don't have to use that. So 2019 rolls around, we developed a vision for this utility technology center, which has become pretty special. But that was the first year that Wallet Hub ranked us number 1 in the country. And we had a party. It was super exciting to be ranked number 1 in the country. Wallet Hub looks at their ranking, which I love their ranking. There are a lot of different rankings that look at a lot of different things, but Wallet Hub is pretty straightforward. They look at career outcomes, so the salary and placement of students. We are top 5 in the country when it comes to career outcomes, so our students get really good jobs. And then student outcomes. And we're again in the top 5 or so in the country when it comes to student outcomes, which is your graduation rate. So Wallet Hub, or Forbes ranked us against like 40 or 50 other schools. Wallet Hub ranks us against about I want to say somewhere between 800 and 900 other 2-year schools. So it's just not technical schools, it is every 2-year school in the country they're comparing against. And so we were first time ever ranked number 1 in the country. The Chronicle of Higher Education ranked us number 4 in the country for graduation rate. So that's just as exciting too. That's about all I had in 2019 as I looked at my notes. So we were ranked, and then it was like nothing happened. What happened in 2019? Pandemic, COVID. I mean, we did what everybody else did, and if I'd do it over again, I'd do things very differently, but we did it like everybody else did. We basically shut things down. When it came to spring semester and a spring break, we sent everybody home. But the one thing I'll say that we did that very few people in the country did, we actually, by the end of that 8 weeks, the end of that spring semester, we looked around and said, hey, we're gonna go ahead and have graduation. And so we are one of the only schools in the country that had an in-person graduation. We call it, a little redneck, we called it tailgate graduation. And we had it outside, but we had an in-person graduation, which is something we're very, very proud of. And I'd say, so then fall of 2020, we came back with another 10% increase in enrollment. We were able to give a mid-year raise when everybody else was cutting. We used the pandemic really to do some great things. We started a new website. We started our civil construction, or civil technology center. Our utility technology center was over construction. We took over the Osage Country Club. That was given to us for $1, and I'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. But we spent a lot of money on software, and at the end of 2020, when everybody else was still in mask, we said, hey, enough of this foolishness. And COVID officially ended on the State Tech campus, probably a year before COVID ended in a lot of places. But through all of COVID, we didn't put one course online. We stayed true. We saw when we closed down in the spring semester 2019, we saw that technical education can't be, the way we teach it, can't be taught online. So then 2021 rolls around, we're getting closer to current. We had $3.5 million in COVID money. Everybody else was using that money to offset their tuition loss. We invested it all in technology. We updated our networking systems. bought more software. We borrowed money for UTC Phase B. We borrowed $3.5 million at 1.9% interest, which sounds really, really good right now. I wish we would have borrowed a whole lot more money at that. We started the Turf and Ground Center. If you're a golfer, the Turf and Ground Center is the Osage Country Club. We started that project. On the back side of that is a really, really nice driving range with Topgolf technology. So that was the start of that. Whenever I talk about Turf and Ground Center, I always talk about we have a student with actually we have a student with 2 Super Bowl rings and a student with a World Series ring. We have some great product there that comes out of that. And again, in 2021, our enrollment was up 10%. We were #1 in the country 3 years in a row. We started a digital marketing program, an ag business program, an energy technology program, an associate of science in business, and a civil construction program. So you can see things are kind of ramping up. I mean, as a new president, you take the first year or two, just kind of observe and see what's going on, get the lay of the land. So now coming into 2021, things are really hitting stride. We have new partnerships with Ditch Witch Vermeer, where they'll bring in Toro. They bring in about $1 million of equipment every year. So they're starting to see, okay, State Tech, they're the real deal. Their reputation is growing. VersaLift is another company that does the same thing. And we hit a landmark. And I can remember sitting in Dr. Claycomb's office, kind of doing the orientation thing, doing the handover, and he made the comment that 2,000, if you could get to 2,000 students, that's a really good goal to have. And 2021, we hit 2,000 students for the first time. So when I started, we were at 1,256. So now we were at 2,000 a year ago. So that brings us up to fall of 2022. Our graduation rate, even with everything going on with the pandemic, because these are finally getting some of the pandemic students from high schools, which we've seen some issues there with some of the high school students. So when they come to us, it used to be, okay, if you can't get into a 4-year, you can go to community college. If you can't get into community college, well, you can go to State Tech. Well, that is very inaccurate. We actually have higher admission standards in a lot of the 4 years. So if you can't pass college algebra and college level writing classes, you're gonna fail out at State Tech. So we're not gonna take you if you can't get through. So we don't take students' money that can't get through the college. Same thing if you don't come to class. Same thing that you started years ago. We're gonna kick you out of school, because again, we're not gonna waste our time and your time. So graduation rate 75%. One thing I always like to talk about too when I talk about graduation rate, and I was kind of shocked by it, our Pell students, our socioeconomically challenged students, actually graduate at a 4% higher graduation rate than our non-Pell students, which is unheard of. But why is that? This isn't scientific, but I attribute it to hope. We take a student that see their parents suffer, and they know that State Tech is how they're going to have that generational change. They were not going to have to suffer like their parents did socioeconomically if they can graduate from State Tech. So I think that's probably one of the things, maybe the thing I'm most proud of about State Tech, that a Pell student is actually going to graduate at a higher rate than non-Pell. So in 2022, easy to remember. So if you're wondering, okay, I can't keep these numbers straight. In 2022, we had 2,200 students. So when you talk to schools, they say, hey, we've got 3,000 students, or we have 3,500 students. Ask them what their FTE is, full-time equivalent. All these schools out there are doing all these dual enrollment, dual credit, part-time students, everything else. Usually their full-time equivalent is somewhere around half of what their head count is. At State Tech, our full-time equivalent, our head count are almost identical, because we do everything on a cohort basis. We have all full-time students. So this year we have our event and entertainment center going up. If you drive down Highway 50 and you look up to your right, you're going to see a big monster building there. It's a 3,000 square foot building. It's going to have a pool. It's going to have a movie theater, bowling, esports. I'm missing several things. Golf simulators. Next to it is that driving range I mentioned. You think, okay, what is all this about? It is about how do we continue to grow. At some point, we're going to hit a saturation level in rural Missouri. And so we got to figure out how do we bring a urban or rural kid or a suburban kid to Lynn, Missouri of 1,300 people. And so we're building that infrastructure right now. So we're looking 3 steps ahead, just like a few years ago when we built the activity center. So we got an ag innovation grant. Right now we have $60 million either under construction or in design. So we went back from having, when I started, a building every year kind of under construction. So we have, I think, 5 buildings either in design or under construction. Have an ag innovation grant moving forward. Ag is going to be a big thing. We have a safety village. Those were both MoExcel projects. Both of those projects were #1 in the state. We have Lake State Tech. We have an 8-acre lake going in. We had 8 heavy equipment operations students actually build it. It's got a sand beach, and it's going to have a place for our power sports students to take boats out on the lake, that kind of thing. So again, we're building. We know our rural students love. I mean, so do urban and suburban and urban students. They love the water, so we're building a lake on campus. And so we're always trying to stay one step ahead of everybody else. So we're often asked on tours by industry, they always ask us, who's your competition? And our answer to that is always, we are our competition. We look at it, how are we continually improving? How are we gonna stay one step ahead of everybody else? From a recruiting of students right now, our biggest competition are jobs. Students can go out there and make $25 an hour without any type of college education, but it's a job, it's not a career. We're always gonna say we're gonna prepare them for careers. So then as we look forward to 2023 and beyond, ag is gonna be a big thing to us. We're in the process of buying a farm, and then we'll be seeking money for agriculture center. So I suspect in the next 5 years, we're gonna go from 50 students in our ag programs to probably 300 or 400. That is an area that we know we can grow. So we're at 2,200, and we're looking at moving. We talk a lot about how do we accommodate 3,000 students. So when you look at this, almost $60 million in construction going on, that's what that's about. How do we grow our workforce? How do we fulfill our mission, which is being the state technical college? How do we provide more and more students, because we know the workforce needs them? And so it's all about how do we continue to grow, and then how do we continue to that vision that was laid out there by Thurman Willett and later by Don. How do we continue that vision and continue to grow? So it's an exciting time at State Tech. I know my folks are moving 100 miles an hour all the time. Unfortunately, trying to keep up with the ideas that we have for the institution. With that brings us very quickly up to where we are today. Do we have questions?
Got a question? There are questions.
You said your goal is about 3,000 students. Do you have quotas in each one of your tech areas as to what you can handle?
Yep. So what we do everything on cohort base. We grow by adding programs, but the most economical thing we can do is grow an individual program. So we'll take a program from 28 students up to 50, from 50 students to 75, and then from 75 to 100. And so that is our goal for all programs, not to just have 28. If the state can only accommodate 28 graduates a year, that's not really living our mission. That's not a program we really need. So our goal is to take every program and continue to grow it. So we sit down, we've already done it for next year. I've got a sheet that says this is the target for each of these programs, and we're gonna get there. We run the place more like a business than any other higher education institution does. Every one of the faculty know exactly what the break-even point is, and they know where they've got to. And as soon as you hold the faculty, you taught, just like students, if you hold them accountable to this level, you're gonna hit a bell curve on it, but you're gonna bring most of them up to this level. But if if you're teaching at a C level, are you still gonna get A's, B's, and C's? Yeah, you're still gonna get A's, B's, and C's. So we set the expectation that the programs are gonna fill, and just like that fill.
And you have to hire a new staff once you increase the numbers of students.
So, and we've used a lot of technology to help not hire staff, faculty. We know when we go from 25 to 50 students, we have to hire one more faculty. So we start with the cohort of 28. I'll have 2 faculty typically for a technical program. Health science is a whole nother monster. But I'll start with 2 faculty, and when I double the size of the program, I have to add a 3rd. So there's an economy of scale, which is why it makes sense to grow programs. Let's just start down. Let's start on the left and work to the right.
You mentioned you wanted to go to a more urban student. Is there any thought of developing an urban campus?
Every time we've done anything remotely, it's failed. We've done St. Charles. We had a program in Mexico. When you don't have the infrastructure there in place, in my opinion, or the support staff there in place, it fails. Rankin, I'm not sure how they do it, other than they charge 2 or 3 times more tuition, and then they get the local. I mean, I'm not even going to go down that road with what they're doing, but we can't make it work.
We don't grow a program either unless we know that they're going to have a good job when they finish. Our mission is to prepare students for profitable employment and a life of learning. In other words, you're going to have a good job when you get out. The jobs are out there, and with a life of learning, you're not done when you leave us. You're going to be learning for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you spoke about getting students to come to Lynn, Missouri. What about faculty? How do you recruit and get people?
It's a challenge. You have to pay a market rate. So we don't look at what higher ed says we should be paying. We take the Bureau of Labor Statistics median, and we add 30% to us, and that is our target salary for faculty. So then you have faculty we hire for industry, not for education. They have 5 years to get a bachelor's degree, and so those type of things haven't changed in decades, forever. I think our biggest challenge is housing in Lynn, Missouri, because the only thing, there is no housing left in Lynn, Missouri unless it's for state tech students, which is the great thing about that is, I mean, we don't have bad renters. I mean, maybe you think students are, but the police in Lynn would tell you that our students were never the problem. And now we've driven the cost of living up. Now, right now we're looking at a couple of farms with 3-bedroom homes on it, and I'm super excited about it, because what are we gonna do with those 3-bedroom homes? We're gonna say, hey, faculty, come to Lynn, you can stay in that for a reasonable amount for a year while you're looking for something in the area, because housing is a challenge around Lynn.
Do you see state tech as helping the city of Lynn to grow and Osage County to grow economically?
Absolutely. I shouldn't say we're the only thing going, but we're pretty close to it.
If you drive into Lynn, on the western edge of Lynn, there's a small ready-mix concrete plant. And it would be interesting to add up the cubic yards of concrete that have gone through that, either directly to the college or indirectly to the college, because we have very limited housing that we have built. Most of our housing has been built by private investors, so all those apartment houses, all of that kind of stuff, the banker will tell you that we are an economic driver in Osage County big time.
So we need about 150 beds every fall. And COVID really hurt that, because people weren't building, there wasn't labor, you couldn't get materials. So we're right now about 150 beds behind. We'll be another 150 beds behind this year. Last year we started a partnership with Lincoln. We put about 30 students in Lincoln. So that helped us some, but definitely if you drive through, apartment after apartment, we've made the decision to give back to the community by not building on campus. We could build apartments, but I'd rather share the wealth.
And we're trying to do a lot of that recreation too, Dr. Strong was talking about. You say, what is there to do in Lynn? And I can remember when students would say, there's indoor drinking and outdoor basketball. That's what they do in Lynn. And Some of you laugh like you understand what that means. I've been there and done that. But now, what they're trying to do by taking over the country club, and that's an asset for the community as well, because the country club was struggling, is to make a pool, a golf course, theater, those kinds of things, that the students have a very nice community.
Could you maybe give us a gamut view of all the different kinds of fields, things like aeronautics to sod development and so on?
Sure, and so the quickest way to do that is inside your front page. So it talks about business, which we do have some business programs. Construction. Construction is a big one, from horizontal construction, not a lot of vertical construction yet. We have one. If you go through each and every one of these programs, people used to ask me, and I'm sure they did too, what's your biggest program? What's your best program? And the answer to that used to be our power line program, our electrical distribution program. That's just no longer the case anymore. Every one of our programs is full, and a number of them are bigger than our power line program, and that used to be our big program. But you take every one of these, HVAC, we bring in 75 students into our, so we have 150 students in our HVAC program every year. They're gonna get a new building. Drafting design, we'll bring in 50 students into that. They're gonna get a new building. Electronics, new building. So when this $40 million of ARPA funds is spent, the only building that won't be renovated or be brand new will be our aviation program. Everything else will have a brand new building. All our manufacturing programs, the state of Missouri is building manufacturing programs all over the state, spending lots and lots of money on manufacturing programs. What's the difference between our program and everybody else's? We have students. I mean, all these other programs are gonna have 8 students that graduate every year. We're gonna graduate 50 students out of our precision machining program. So that's why we're the employer's choice. That's why folks come to us. So I could go through every one of these programs and tell you something great about it, but I think we're out of time.
I just want to mention one thing. You heard Dr. Strong talk about, we've got students that have got a World Series ring, and we've got students that's got a Super Bowl ring. How do you suppose that none of them played baseball or football? How did they get them? We have a turf and grounds program that has a national reputation, that has a standing offer for students to come and intern with them. And a few years ago, we had a student, a young man from Paris, Missouri, who ended up with, who was in the series that year?
Sox.
What?
It'd been the Red Sox.
Red Sox. He ended up, as a result of his internship, he was the person that they put in charge of the pitching mound. And when they got ready to have their last, what they hoped would be their last series game, they flew him from Lynn. He was in school, and came back from internship in school, back out to be ready to keep the pitching mound ready. Well, they lost, and he didn't have to do that. And then on football, the young man who takes care of the Kansas City Chiefs training facility for them in the summertime when they're up at Missouri Western State College is a graduate of Lynn Tech.
And now
Excuse me, I said Lynn Tech.
He works at
too.
the stadium, and that's where he got a Super Bowl
Yeah.
ring this year. I saw another question over here somewhere on the. Go ahead back here again.
Well, I was gonna ask, way back, sometime near the beginning, you had arrangements with different businesses that helped you develop a program, like Favy with construction equipment. Do you still have those kinds of things?
Sure, we still have a Cat Think Big program, so we're one of a dozen schools in the country with a Cat Big Think program.
And only 22 in the world.
PCCA, the Power and Communication Contractors Association, partnered with us on our utility technician program. I was actually in Miami last week presenting to that group. They partner with 5 schools. The other school, I think, has 5 students in it. We have about 150. So when we do something, we're gonna do it right. And that's the problem with higher ed. They just don't know how to do things right sometimes.
I taught at K-State, and I taught at MU at one time, at each of those institutions. And I remember one time, one of my fellow faculty members said, we're getting a grant from industry, but they won't tell us what we're gonna do with that grant. And we're not gonna do it. We're gonna do what we wanna do with it. That's been the opposite way we do things. If an industry, you know, our job, we think, is to get that student ready to go to work for them, that's got the skills, the knowledge, and the attitude that they want. So if they give us money, if they give us equipment, if they loan us equipment, for example, we're gonna ask them in that money, what do you wanna have done with it? We're gonna be responsive to industry, and I think that's where the employer's choice comes in. They go out ready to do what the industry wanted to be done. And I see I told Chris, it's hard to turn out, you know, you can't tell a school administrator to be quiet. I thought I could get by telling him that.
Last thing, all I do is thank all of you for sending students over the years to State Tech and continuing to use your influence to send students to us, because we're going to do a great job with the student, and what we say, we transform lives and we break cycles of poverty. We
Jefferson
do it
City
better
has
than
been very
anybody else.
important to us.
Absolutely.
Don and Shawn, thank you very much. Okay, 10-minute break and we'll come back and talk about, learn about Lincoln University.
Continuing our program on the uniqueness of Missouri, nothing is more unique, I think, than Lincoln University. It has so many unique features that it's kind of mind-boggling. So we've asked Mark Scheer, the archivist at Lincoln University, to come and share it with us. Mark is born and raised in Jefferson City, 5th generation of Jefferson Cityans. Many of you are too young to remember, but his parents and grandparents ran Scheer Brothers hardware store on High Street. I can remember that. Anyway, it is just a delight to have Mark with us today, and he's going to share with us the uniqueness of Lincoln University.
I don't know if I'm gonna need this or not. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Uh-oh. Now I got a problem. I lost my. I'm gonna let you handle that. I lost my okay. Uniqueness. First of all, thank you for the introduction. Does anybody graduate or attend Lincoln University? Anybody have any family members that have? So, most people in the house have some connection to Lincoln University. It is quite unique. Thank you. Okay. Now I know nobody's old enough to remember this gate that used to be at Lincoln Institute, which is what our name was when we were founded. I will say that the two inside pillars are the oldest structures on campus, that are still around from the Lincoln Institute era. Everything is gone, and I'll talk about Lincoln Institute itself and then how we became Lincoln University. But it is a unique institution. I want to ask you a question. Who's heard of the soldier's dream? Has anybody heard of that? I'll explain that here in a minute. As you know, as was said earlier, 1861, the Civil War begins. Many causes to that, many reasons for it, but the fact is that the North and the South were at odds, were at war with each other. And African American men were not allowed to join the U.S. military until 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln decided they needed help. And many black people heeded the cause, even though they would be fighting for a country that in the Constitution of the of the United States said that they were only worth 3/5 of a human being. Isn't that the clause? 3/5?
3/5.
So, you're 3/5, that's 2 arms and a leg, is that right? And in 1857, the Supreme Court said to Dred Scott, a slave, you're property. So this is what the government had declared as their existence. But black men and a few women served their country, fought for the North. And they were allowed to fight, but not beside white soldiers. Segregation was the law of the land. That's the way things were. Regiments were formed. There were 4 regiments of black soldiers from Missouri: the 62nd, the 63rd, the 65th, and the 68th. I may have 2 of those numbers wrong, but the 62nd and the 65th are the soldiers that helped to found Lincoln Institute. Most of them were born in Missouri. Most of them were born as slaves. So, they got to the Army, and one of the first things that their officers decided to do at Jefferson Barracks, Benton Barracks, excuse me, in St. Louis was to give them an education so that not only they could be better soldiers, but they could be prepared for a life of freedom, which they had never known before. Now, how come these guys didn't know how to read and write? Were they too stupid? It was against the law. There was a law in 1850 in Missouri that said slaves were not allowed to be educated. So, their officers decided that we're going to give them an opportunity for education. And I want you to remember that phrase, opportunity for education. And they fought in the Army. Didn't fight in a lot of battles, but they did. The members of the 62nd fought in the last battle of the Civil War down in Texas. Members of the 65th mainly served in Louisiana as backup crews, cleanup crews for the regular troops. And the war ends in 1865, the North wins, and these guys in the 62nd are still down in Texas, waiting to go home. And in the late 1865, at Fort Bravos in Texas, this is how the story goes. The men of the 65th, some members, not all of them because there are thousands, but sitting around a campfire is depicted in the picture here. And they're talking about what they're going to do when they go back home. Well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Somebody, and they're not sure exactly who came up with the idea right up off the bat, but they said, let's start a school back home for our folks so they can get what we got. Learning, education. This is kind of an early version of pay it forward, if you've heard that expression. So other members say, hey man, that's a great idea, let's do that, let's do that. So between the 62nd and the 65th, they raised $6,000. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but these guys were making $100 a year as soldiers. One guy named Samuel Sexton gave $120 to fund the school that they were going to start. Lincoln is the only institution of higher learning founded by African American veterans. It's the only institution of higher learning founded by Civil War veterans. And I'll ask you a question. Have you ever heard of an institution of higher learning founded and funded by slaves in the history of the world. We are unique. We're very unique. So, here's the plan. We're going to go back home. We're going to start a school. The lieutenant for the 62nd, one of them, his name was Richard Baxter Foster. Now, it is my honor to get to portray him in a Civil War uniform. If you've ever seen the homecoming parade, and there's two guys walking down the street, one white guy, one black guy. I'm the white guy. And he's a very interesting man. He was from New Hampshire, educated in Dartmouth, and he went out west to teach school. And he wound up getting hooked up with John Brown, the abolitionist. And he was all for the cause of John Brown, but he said, I don't like your methods. And right before the Potawatomi massacre in Kansas, he parted ways with them, but he had always been against slavery. So when the Civil War broke out, he was in Nebraska, and he joined the Army. And then when they started having what they called United States Colored Troops, he volunteered for that, and he became a lieutenant for the 62nd. So the men entrusted him with their funds and asked him to be the first principal of the school. And they named it after the late President, Abraham Lincoln. And the charter states that they will provide opportunity for education for all, not just African Americans, not just black people. Anybody could go to Lincoln, but the schools were segregated at the time, and they didn't, I mean, there were a few white teachers that were there that did have their kids educated, but the opportunity for education is what we call on campus the soldier's dream. And the soldier's dream came true. And I like to tell my students, when I teach U.S. history class as an adjunct, in addition to my archival duties, and I tell them, you're the latest version of the soldier's dream. Make it come true, please. And it's something that we honor on this campus. Now, the school gets started. And so, what are they doing right off the bat? It's not Lincoln University, it's Lincoln Institute. So are they teaching physics and political science and algebra and all that stuff? No. These poor folks, they're getting their first shot at education, so it's going to be the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. But one of the first things that they do, and this is a really good insight on Foster's part, he has an idea. Let's take our better students, train them to be teachers. That way they can go out into the public, into the black schools in the state and throughout the Midwest, and teach the younger kids the 3 R's, so that when they do get to Lincoln, they will be able to tackle algebra and chemistry and history. So they set up teacher education, what they call a normal school, and that was the first degrees that they offered. The first building on the campus, on the present side of the campus, was the first Memorial Hall that was built in 1871. They did give degrees for what they call pedagogy, which is teacher education. And this is one that we have from William Lansdowne. This is from 1884, and we have that in the archives, and it's just really marvelous to look at. And actually, I got to tell you a little story. That big picture there, we lifted it off this, Claycomb. So, yeah, we never really had a good picture of that before. All the photographs that were taken of were, you know, looked like an 1870s photograph. So, we were lucky to get it. But the soldier's dream came true. So, we're going along, we're teaching teachers how to teach, we're teaching African American men and women, boys and girls. Let me tell you, there was some genealogical work I was doing, and I was looking through these old student registers from about 1870, late 1870s, early 1880s. And I kept running across a town in Colorado. It was called Leadville. And there were about 6 students from Leadville, Colorado that came to Lincoln Institute. First of all, why would they come all the way to Lincoln? And second of all, I didn't even think it through, but what were black folks doing in Leadville, Colorado? Well, anything they wanted. It was after the Civil War, and African Americans who had enough money to get out of the South did so. A lot of them went west, and they were miners. But there was one entry that struck me, and the girl's name was Rachel Walker, and she was there in 1882. She was 14 years old, and her mother signed in, and I'm supposing that her mother went back to Leadville. So this 14-year-old girl was alone in Jefferson City, Missouri. That takes a lot of guts. It shows the influence of Lincoln University, but it also shows the determination of African Americans to get an education at that time. I find that inspiring for my students, and I like to remind them of that they don't have it so bad when their battery goes out on their phone. Okay, so another unique thing about Lincoln is we are the oldest 1890 land grant institution. We already got a little primer on land grant schools. So HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, were included into the Morrill Act, and we became a land grant institute. Now, like you said, federal land was donated, but the land was already given to the other schools, so Lincoln got money for that. And this is going to change the face of Lincoln. It's going to change the face of the curriculum and the objectives of the school. Up until then, we're training teachers and doing rudimentary education. The Morrill Act said you can develop agricultural programs and industrial or mechanical arts. Anybody know where the football field is at Lincoln Reed Stadium? Sure. They're on Chestnut. Yeah. Anybody remember seeing a silo located there back in the 60s and 70s? Cows on Chestnut Street? Yes, there were. I lived up on Laurel Drive. I was in my neighborhood, and that's where the farm was, the original farm. And that's where we got our foothold in agriculture. Now, we've gone on to develop other farms such as Carver, Busby, and Freeman. And if I remember Greenberry Farm, out on the end of Greenberry. So quite a bit of farmland around Jeff City owned by Lincoln. But one of the biggest things it did, we started vocational training, industrial training. This building on top is called Chin Hall. It was there from 1894 to 1930. So courses like woodworking, which these guys are doing here. You can't see it too well, but What do these guys have on? What are they wearing? Got like suits and hats. They're running wood lathes in there. That's just the way it was at the time. It's kind of cool looking at that. So woodworking, ironworking, wagon making, shoemaking, tailoring, and ladies. Okay, ladies. If you were not in the teacher ed program, you were going to be taking courses in hat making, cooking, sewing, cleaning. But that's just the way it was back then. So now we've expanded our curriculum and we have new coursework, and the enrollment increases. We're not just a local institution anymore. And agriculture, more than ever, is still a vital part, there we go, of our curriculum. The agriculture department is second to nursing in enrollment at Lincoln. And we've gotten a lot of money from research and grants through that department. And, excuse me, I'm proud to say that this past year was the first year in many that Lincoln was allotted its fair share of state money, of matching funds for the land grant. And we hope that continues, because it hasn't been happening till now. Okay. So, oops, I went backwards. All right. Who knew that Lincoln was the Black Harvard of the Midwest? Anybody? Anybody heard that? Yeah, been around. Okay, so when did Lincoln Institute become Lincoln University? Well, 1921, a man from St. Louis was the first African-American elected to the Missouri General Assembly. His name was Walthall Moore. He sponsored a bill for Lincoln Institute to become Lincoln University. And they recruited, well, for a couple of years, it really didn't change much, just the name changed. Coursework really didn't change a whole lot. The degrees they offered didn't change much. But in 1923, a guy named Nathan Young, who Young Hall is named after, he comes in from Columbia University, not in Columbia, Missouri, but New York City. It's an Ivy League school, like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth. He's a regular A cadet. He knows a lot. He's smart. And he comes in. And Missouri is a segregated state. So Lincoln University is the only university that African Americans in the state can go to. And he looks around and he's just scratching his head. He goes, so we're supposed to be MU for black people. Let's just make it so. And he recruits a lot of his fellow Ivy Leaguers, people like Lorenzo Green. Have you heard of him? Lorenzo Green driver. History teacher. Oliver Cox, who taught sociology. Oscar Fuller, who was the first PhD, African-American PhD in music, taught music at Lincoln, and he was also the organist at Immaculate Conception for a while. And one of the writers of the Harlem Renaissance, Sterling Brown, taught English there for quite a long time. So now we're getting serious about this. We had to walk before we can run. We started running, and now we're gonna start sprinting. We're gonna get in a hurry. Once again, enrollment goes up. People said, look at Lincoln, look at the teachers they have there. I wanna go there. In 1940, we started offering graduate degrees. So, in a span of 76 years, no, 74 years, we went from teaching ABCs to offering master's degrees. That's progress. And the extracurricular programs at Lincoln expanded as well. Fraternities and sororities began appearing on campus. We had groups like the Philosophy Club, the dance troupe got its start in the 1930s, the debate club, Stagecrafters with Dr. Thomas Pauley. A lot of influence. But the one thing that happened that really strikes me, and I like to tell the students a story about this. In 1932, we did not have a school newspaper. And there were some students that wanted to start one. And they didn't get any help from the English department. They didn't go for help to the English department. We didn't have a journalism department yet. These guys were the pledge class of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, 18 and 19-year-old guys. Pledges. I was a pledge for a fraternity when I was 18 or 19 years old, and starting a newspaper was not on my list of things to do. So these guys are really ambitious, but this shows you the determination, the drive, the ingenuity that students on this campus have. And the Lincoln Clarion is 91 years old this year. And I'll show you something later on about what they're up to now. Lincoln was where African Americans wanted to go in the 1920s and 1930s. And we really made a name for ourselves. Started publications like the Midwest Journal, which Lorenzo Green was the editor of, and just did a lot of research, a lot of academic work there at Lincoln during that time. I don't have this on here, but I do want to say that, it says up to the 50s. What happened in 1954 to change the face of education in the United States?
Brown versus the board.
Brown versus board. And I'll talk about that in a bit. I keep giving you these teasers. But after Brown versus board, African Americans could go to school wherever they wanted. So could white people. And local whites, people that look like me, living in Jeff City, had a choice. Now, University of Missouri is a great school. University of Missouri, let's see, it's 30 miles away. Lincoln, it's down the block. University of Missouri costs an arm and a leg. Lincoln costs you an arm. And Lincoln is the black heart of the Midwest. I'm going there. And a lot of people did. And the enrollment from 1954, it was about 400, rose over to over 1,000 by 1961. It's a lot of people. And a lot of people went there for teacher education. I know a lot of my teachers in grade school and high school had a degree from Lincoln. And that was their bread and butter for a long time. Okay, so, has anybody ever heard of Lloyd Gaines? Okay, Lloyd Gaines got a degree in history from Lincoln University. So we're not, but I didn't do as good as Lloyd Gaines. I didn't make myself famous like this. He wants to go to law school at MU. Now, we just talked about that. He sends in his application. They write him back and say, yeah, send us your transcript. Then they find out where the transcript is from. They go, oh, sorry, we can't accept it. But what we can do is we can pay your way to go to law school in Illinois, Kansas, or Iowa. This is the way Missouri did things. And Lloyd says, you know what, that's nice, but I am a citizen of the state of Missouri. I'm going to law school in my home state. MU says, we'll see you in court. So, it takes 3 years, and finally they make it to the United States Supreme Court, who tells the state of Missouri, you allow Mr. Gaines to attend law school at the University of Missouri, or build a separate but equal facility for him. Well, 1939, Missouri. What are they going to say? What are they going to say? Come on, Lloyd, come to MU. We want to have you here. Come sit down and eat supper with us. Go out with my daughter. Okay? So, now, state of Missouri passes something called the Taylor Bill that says Lincoln University is going to get a law school. Now, meantime, Lloyd says, well, that's nice. I'm still going to MU. We'll see you back in court. Remember, this is 1930, 38, 39. The Depression's still going on. Unemployment for African American males is 50%. This includes Lloyd. He's looking for a job. All he's been doing is working on this case and making speeches and whatnot. He doesn't have an income. He writes to his mother. He says, you know, I just want to be a regular guy. You know, I just want to get on with my life. And he made his way up to Chicago to look for work, and he was staying at the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity house, which he belonged to, there, and it was March 19th. It was a rainy night in Chicago, and Lloyd was a big letter writer, wrote to everybody, you know, everybody did back then, but he wrote to his mother and his brother a lot, and he ran out of stamps, and he says to the house mother, he puts on his hat and coat, I'm going to get some stamps, I'll be right back. And nobody ever saw Lloyd Gaines again. Now, theories on this. Did he run away? Did he get paid to run away? Did he get amnesia? Did he get thrown in the Chicago River? Did he get kidnapped and driven back to Jefferson City and lynched in McClung Park? Those are all theories. Did he wind up teaching high school in Harlem? That's a theory. Did he run a bar and grill in Mexico City? It's a theory. All kinds of stuff out there, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. But the thing is, Lloyd Gaines still made an impression. The law school, they opened it in St. Louis. Now, why would they do a thing like that? Why would they open it in St. Louis? There's two reasons. One, it was cheap. Because there was a beauty school called Poro, P-O-R-O, Poro Beauty College, that had just recently closed. It had dorms, it had classrooms, had a cafeteria, had a recreation area, even had a movie theater. We don't have to build a building. And there's a significant African American black population in St. Louis. You don't have to move. You don't have to quit your job. We'll have night courses. You can stay right here. So, for 17 years, Lincoln University had a law school. Anybody know that? Yeah, and one of the reasons it closed, Brown versus Board of Education, there's that thing. African Americans had a choice. They didn't have to go to Lincoln Law School. But it was their only choice for a while. So it served its purpose, time marched on, things changed, and enrollment dropped, and they had to lose the law school. Now, has anybody heard of Plessy versus Ferguson? It's a court case from 1896. Well, what do you know about it, Frank?
I forgot.
Yeah, okay, Plessy was a guy, a black guy in Louisiana, and he got on the first class coach of a train. They tried to get him off of there. Said, no, you can't sit here, you gotta go to the back. He contested that. And it went to the Supreme Court in 1896. The Supreme Court set up that thing that says separate but equal. Now, in many cases, it was always separate, but in most, it was not equal. So, Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, which integrated schools. What happened in between there? Well, the first thing was Lloyd Gaines. So he was the first major stepping stone to Brown versus Board. That's a unique thing about Lincoln. Here's another one. Did you know that Lincoln used to have aviation classes? This was right before World War II started. You know, the country wasn't at war, but we wanted to be ready. So civilian air patrol programs were popping up around the country. And the local airport starts recruiting at Lincoln. This was big because this is the first historically black college and university to offer aviation classes. And we had this program here for about 4 years. And when World War II did break out, students on campus did heed the call. And this was a tough time for Lincoln because nearly every eligible male on campus left to serve, and that includes faculty and staff as well as students. So our enrollment dipped down pretty low. There were some things we had to cut. We had to cut the grad school, we had to cut the law school, and then we didn't have a yearbook during most of the 40s, just to cut back. There were a lot of USO activities on campus as well. Tuskegee Airmen, who's heard of them? 13 Lincolnites become Tuskegee Airmen. And the most famous is this dashing young fellow here, Wendell Pruitt. He was in the aviation program. That's where he learned how to fly, and man, did he fly. Serving over Italy, he shot down a heck of a lot of German planes. I don't think it was more than 10, but it was close to it. He paid the ultimate sacrifice for his country. Let me tell you what Wendell Pruitt did. Wendell Pruitt was scheduled to graduate in June of 1942. In March, 3 months before that, he enlisted to serve his country. He could have waited. He could have gotten that degree. But he was a patriot, and he served his country, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice for it. So, civilian air patrol. Oh, and they revived the program in the mid-1960s with the Vietnam War going on, and that program included helicopters. Okay, that's a unique fact about Lincoln University. We are the birthplace of HBCU journalism. Lucille Bluford, she already had a degree in journalism from Kansas, but she applied for graduate school. That was at MU's journalism school. And same thing as Lloyd Gaines, they said no. And the same thing happens. The Missouri State Supreme Court says you'll have to build your own journalism school. And we were the first HBCU to have a journalism program. Not Howard, not Spelman, not Tuskegee, not Fisk, a little bitty Lincoln. And also, the first female dean of a graduate of a journalism school, her name was Thelma Boozer. She was a renowned journalist, worked for the Amsterdam News, black newspaper up in New York City. She came down here and helped establish that. We were the only HBCU J school until 1968. So for like 25 years, 26 years, you could only get a journalism degree from an HBCU at Lincoln. Mitchell Hall on our campus, named after Joseph Mitchell, who was the editor of the St. Louis Argus. He was a big supporter of Lincoln University, and he helped us stay on our feet as far as the J School for a long time. We still have a journalism program. Armistead Pride, who was the head of the journalism department for like 100 years, for a very, very long time, started Unity and Media Awards, which is still a thing that we do in Lincoln. And this is kind of nice. This is the first journalism class at Lincoln University in 1941. As I said about the Clarion, it's continuing as well as the journalism program, but it's not a school anymore. Same thing that happened to the law school because of enrollment. Excuse me. The journalism program went from a school to a department, but it's still there and it's still making trending new things, and the journalism tradition continues as being groundbreakers with the first HBCU to have drone technology. So we're right there on the cutting edge. And these guys get some really good shots of the campus and the surrounding area. And there's all kinds of videos on YouTube that shows that. So, journalism.
Mark.
Oh, this might be one of my last ones. Question?
Question.
Yeah.
Miss Bluford.
Yes.
In Kansas City, she operated the Kansas City Call.
For a lot of years.
Yeah,
A lot of years.
met with her a couple times. when
Yeah.
I was
Oh,
there.
okay.
And she had a nephew that became, I think, one of the first black astronauts.
Ah, I didn't know that. Very nice. Anybody else?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
What'd he say?
We could not hear what he said.
Oh, I'm sorry, about Lucille Bluford.
Yes.
He said that she was the editor of the Kansas City Call, black newspaper from there for, about 40 years or so, wasn't it? And her nephew was one of the first black astronauts. Yeah, very exciting. Okay, here's one of my favorites. Let me ask you a question. Which university in Missouri has the most national sports championships? I'll give you a hint. In second place at St. Louis University was 7 soccer titles. But twice as many is Lincoln University. We've got 14 championships in women's track since 2001. 9 outdoor, 5 indoor, and 3 years we pulled the double where we won both the indoor and the outdoor, so and that's pretty cool. We've had some outstanding athletes, but one of the most outstanding we've had was a lady named Lorraine Graham. She was a native of Jamaica, and in the Olympics, she ran for Jamaica and won 2 silver medals. So very proud of her. Over 100 All-American performances. Whoops, this guy, Victor Thomas, known as Poppy, he's the coach, and he's the reason for all this. He recruits a lot of students from Jamaica. And one thing that Poppy insists on is you being a student athlete and not an athlete student. And I've had a lot of Jamaican kids in my classes, and they are very, very hardworking, driven, and just a lot of fun to be with. This is Poppy. He's got 14 titles, but he said this is his favorite statistic. The Lady Blue Tigers team, the grade point average for the whole 21 years, cumulative, is over 3.0. Those are student athletes. So we do have a dynasty. Okay. This is not really unique, but in some ways it is. This guy, okay, here's the background. I told you about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I got a list from a lady that said, can you check these people and see if they were students at Lincoln? They're Tuskegee Airmen. And I recognized nearly all of them, but this guy I'd never heard of. His name is Malalu Woolfolk. He didn't have a file in our alumni collection. And so I looked him up in the yearbook. And this is from 1938, when he graduated. And I looked at him and I said, you know, he looks a little bit older than his classmates. So I went to the registrar's office and I pulled his card. He was born in 1906. And he graduated in 1938. So he's 32 years old in this picture. Still looks pretty young. But I thought, what's his story? Well, Malalu was born in 1906 in Holly Springs, Mississippi. And when he was 18 years old, his family moved to St. Louis. And he started his formal education, high school, at 18. He went for 3 years. Then his dad got sick. He had to drop out to help his family. And just as he was getting ready to go back, the depression hits. And he stays out of school to help his family. So in 1934, at the age of 28 years old, he enrolls at Lincoln University High School. We had a high school. To finish his classes. No online courses, no GEDs. No night school. He had to, pardon my language, he had to sit his butt down in a seat with people 10 years older than him. That takes a lot of guts and a lot of determination. And he graduates in 1935. He gets his high school diploma. So it took him about 10 years to finish high school. You know, with a big gap. He had a really long gap year in there. So what does he do? In the fall of in 1935, he enrolls at Lincoln University. He stays in Jeff City. He doesn't know anybody there, but he stays in Jeff City. And he's 10 years older than all his classmates. But that didn't stop him. He was a big man on campus, very soft-spoken though. He was vice president of the Student Government Association. He was in the history club. He was in the debate club. He was I said vice president. He was also in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He got a degree in education and graduated in 1938. Now wait a minute. He started in 1935 and graduated in 1930. He got out of college in 3 years. Took him 10 years to get out of high school. This guy's getting really good at this now. So, this is before the Gaines decision. Malalou wants, and Malalou and Lloyd were in the same fraternity, by the way. Malalou wants to go to grad school, so he goes to Minnesota, where he doesn't know anybody, and works on a master's in psychology, which he earns in 1 year. Took me 2 to get mine. He's really good at this. So he gets a job teaching at Alabama State Teachers College, and he moves down there where he knows no one, and he teaches for a couple of years. 1942, he does what Wendell Pruitt does. He enlists. He's 36 years old. They're probably not going to call his number. They might, but you know they're going to take the younger guys first. So 36 years old, he enlists, and he's in the Tuskegee Airmen. He's one of the 13 Lincolnites in the Tuskegee Airmen, and he serves. And in 1946, he's 40 years old. He gets out of the Army, Air Corps. And you think, good job, Malibu, way to go. I'm going to Chicago where I know no one and enroll in DePaul University Law School. I'm going to be a lawyer. He graduates from DePaul with a Juris Doctor degree. He's now Dr. Woolfolk. And he moves to Harlem, New York, where he knows no one, and becomes one of the most respected and just revered civil rights lawyer in New York for the next 30 years that I never heard of. And I got this story and I thought, wow, this is really inspirational. You know, I want to tell my students about this guy. You know, and I got to thinking about his story and how I serendipitously, however you say it, luckily stumbled onto it. And that caused me to think, well, how many do I know about? So how many more hidden heroes do I have to look for? That's what keeps me on the job. We need something on that campus named after him. And I'm working on it, but very inspiring story. Well, as you know, Lincoln has gone through some tough times lately with the COVID and our enrollment dropping, but things are turning around. We have a new president who I really like. Not just saying that because he's my boss, but he's got some good ideas. And the thing about John Mosley is that he will admit when he needs help with something. He doesn't try to take everything on himself. He gets experts to back him up to get him pointed in the right direction, and I think we're headed that way. So, I'm a Lincolnite and I'm proud of it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was curious when the previous speakers mentioned kind of beefing up the agriculture program at Wayne Tech. How do we avoid guys talking to them? Cause when they
well-
said that, I was like, wait a minute, that's Lincoln's job.
Well, I think there's room for both. I think, some of the programs that we have, they don't, but I think there's a little, things that are similar, but, I think there's room for both.
Well, that's why I wondered, are
Yeah.
they getting into some things that you guys
Well, I
don't
you know,
have?
I looked in the brochure and I saw agribusiness, which is something we've done for a long time. But we do stuff like aquaculture and wildlife management, things like that. So that's kind of related with the environmental sciences as well.
Martin, thank you so very, very much.
Oh, did I go over that?